Hello, everybody. It is Jane Rachel. I am back with an amazing panel, including my two nieces, Sam and Brittany, Alan, the boyfriend of my third niece, and Kristen, the amazing woman who's one of the administrators on the subreddit to Maladaptive Daydreaming. We just had a whole discussion on the difference between normal or normative daydreaming, immersive, and maladaptive daydreaming. But there are a few areas that we still wanted to discuss. And I think the first is the intersection between maladaptive daydreaming and mental health. And Brittany, you want to start that off with a question that you had?
Yeah, I was just curious what in your research, Kristen and Jane, had found about the relationship between OCD and maladaptive daydreaming. Because when I was listening to you guys talk, having had or still have, but now it's a lot better than it was. I don't really have it anymore. OCD in my life, I know that feeling of like I want to keep thinking or I have to keep thinking about something even if I'm interrupted, and I want to be present in the moment, but I can't be because I'm obsessing about some email I sent or have to send or something in my own life. But at the same time, it's not really enjoyable. Like I didn't want to keep doing it. I felt like I had to, and like I couldn't control it, versus not, I want to keep thinking about this. It was actively irritating me. And so just curious to your thoughts.
So interesting, first comes to me is like there's some similarities and differences. Whereas, so the maladaptive daydreaming, I felt it was more like an addiction than a compulsion because I loved it, right? Like, and I remember a reporter asked me once, well, can you control it? And I was like, well, I'm not schizophrenic. It's not like a hallucination, but it's kind of like when you put a hot fudge sundae out in front of me and I'm on a diet, like I technically can control it, but I can't. So I do think it's different from OCD in that there's an enjoyable content, like, right, which is what makes it so addictive. But interestingly, I also being, genetically related to you, Britt, I think did a lot of obsessing about like when I was younger and had less confidence, like, oh, I made a mistake, I spelled something wrong, or I said something stupid. And I would try to cover those thoughts with the daydreaming, right? So if I was daydreaming, I wasn't having those OCD thoughts. So I'm going to shut up in 1 second, but only just to say with the research, what I'm noticing, and Dr. Sommer's really doing now the more scientific research. I'm hearing more anecdotally, but I am hearing from people around the world, and it seems to intersect. Like I've heard with people with OCD and maladaptive daydreaming, but I've heard from people with ADD and maladaptive daydreaming, people with depression, people with social anxiety, and on these communities, and I'm sure Kristen can attest to it. Someone will be like, well, I'm introverted with social anxiety. Who else has this? And all these people will say yes, but I don't have that at all. I'm an extrovert, and I have OCD. So I go back to Dr. Sommer's theory, which I share, that some of us are born with this innate ability, but when it's paired with either childhood trauma or maybe OCD, depression, loneliness, OCD, then for those people, it might more likely turn compulsive. But Alan, I know you also had some thoughts too about depression and loneliness and
definitely. And I just a thought about the sort of Brit versus others. It seems like the reward center is a little different, right? Whereas like the daydreaming kind of gives you the immediate reward, but the compulsive, even though you're not enjoying it, you're seeking a reward of completion later, or right. But anyway, that aside, I definitely identify as an introvert. I like being at home. I like being by myself. It could be the result of being an only child. So I spent a lot of my childhood sort of by myself or just with my parents. And, however it all connects, but I also struggle with some, moderate depression and anxiety on a day-to-day, right? So all of that kind of put together, I think, Sam, you mentioned it being like sort of the comforting, safe space, right? It's a place where I can go that it's just the stuff that I like. It's stuff that I can control. It's fun. And so I think I think I'm sort of almost borderline maladaptive without the actual sort of addiction component, more of a daydream glutton, right? I just really like doing it.
Yeah.
As I am with other things, but I just find myself wanting to go back and back and back. And I think a lot of that is sort of was my coping of being by myself, right? They weren't imaginary friends, but it was an imaginary
Worlds in your
world and thing.
Yes.
And, you know, I would like act it out, right? When
Yeah.
I was younger, and even into my later adulthood, not so much anymore. But
Did you do any pace? Because so many people with MD and Samantha as well, and me as a child, like would pace in circles. Did you do any of that stuff?
so I think that's like, you know, I was like acting, because, you know, I was maybe like a superhero or like a Ninja Turtle or something, right? So I'm like acting it out, like fighting.
Yeah, that's
I've
cool.
even like had a conversation, like, you know, with myself, right? Kind of like shifting myself. But yeah, I wouldn't say like strictly pacing
But
by itself.
yeah, that's
I do it at the
that-
gym a lot, so it's like I'm running and things. So
Yeah, well, for some reason, daydream. I mean, Samantha's told me she used to swing on a swing. I think even normal people, Brittany might, even our control might be able to relate to the fact that it's easier to daydream in a car for some reason, right?
You know,
but I
that's
guess-
Brittany's best daydreaming place is in the car.
right? And she's the normative person.
Yeah.
And I am intrigued though, back to the difference between immersive and maladaptive. Like if you were in the middle of daydream and someone like, let's say Monica interrupted you, not to get in trouble with Monica, would you be annoyed? Like,
no, like not really. On the one hand, it's like, yeah, you're interrupting me. It's kind of like I'm there so much that it doesn't matter that you're interrupting me, right? Because as soon as you leave, I'm going back, right? So yeah, it's that pausing thing, you know, that you guys should take. That's like no problem for me, right? And I'm not usually in any of my daydreams. I think that's another thing. It's not about me. I've never wanted to hang out with a celebrity. Maybe it's just because I don't like celebrities, but
it's the only one that I want to hang out with.
but that's not really. I mean, it might be someone that like I know that I want to like hang out with, or some, you know, social experience that I could have gone differently or something, right? But yeah, generally I'm just thinking about Superman.
Yeah, I had two
Mine are always about myself being awesome.
Yeah,
that's a problem.
There's nothing about myself.
I always had the two kinds. I had the one with like the worlds that, you know, I wasn't in at all with my TV characters, and then one that I was in. And of course, you know, you're always this better version of yourself. Alan, I'm still intrigued though about like, you don't think it has affected your life negatively in any, you know, relationships, friends, and I wonder like what the difference is. I think it's the control thing. I think like when you need to focus on work, you focus on work. When you need to be present in the moment, right? I think that's probably the difference.
I think it's a control thing, yeah, for sure, of being able to switch it on and off, sort of a mental agility almost, right? To the point where, I mean, like, maybe because I've done it so much, but like, I feel like sometimes I can double think, right? And just sort of like live life while still thinking about other things.
And you don't find that exhausting? Because I found that exhausting. I felt like I had a TV on in my head 24/7, and it was distracting and exhausting.
No, I mean, in fact, I work with the TV on, right? I just like play Bob's Burgers on mute while I work. And I don't know, it's almost comforting, right? It's like having your blankie like on hand. Yeah. And yeah, okay, maybe carrying it around is annoying, but I'd rather have it than not
have it.
Well, that's interesting too, with like mentioning the TV in the background, because it is like when I'm either having like a background show or really listening to music as well, having background things actually helps me focus so much. So sometimes, even though it's like, oh, I'm daydreaming about something, so I'm not being productive every second that I'm working, it's actually can be helpful, you know, because it's a specific place for my mind to go. And so it actually helps me to stay focused.
That's a good point. I hadn't actually thought of it that way. I think that's probably what it is, right? Because it's like I have two attention spans that I have to distract, right?
Yeah.
So
what about, you know, like Kristen mentioned 4 days. I would, when I was younger, would be up all night. I'd forget to sleep, slept to eat. Did yours ever go to that extreme?
No. Certainly wouldn't not eat. That was my other gluttony.
So there could be, you know, again, I think the difference is, I think there's some of us were born with this, you know, immersive daydreaming building, but for some reason, like Kristen and I could just do it days on end, and forget to eat or sleep. I don't, Kristen, am I missing out any other differences between, either your experience or community members as far as what turns it maladaptive?
Or even its connection to mental health. I think it'd be interesting to hear, Kristen, your experience there, if you'd like to share.
I actually think my experience is a lot like Sam's, except different. I'm so good at words. So
that's what we're exploring. The same.
We know exactly what you mean, though.
Yes, exactly.
And even Alan was talking about it as a coping strategy and a safe space. And that is something that we see a lot. Where people say, "Oh, well, it's not a disorder; it's a coping strategy." But those are not mutually exclusive terms. A coping strategy can turn into a disorder. And I think that's the difference between us, because I haven't been to a therapist. So I don't want to self-diagnose here, but I probably have anxiety.
You would know. Right?
And I didn't know. Just a couple of years ago, I would have, turned myself somebody who didn't have any problems. I don't have ADHD. I don't have anxiety. I don't have depression. I don't have anything. I'm just a normal person who also daydreams. But that's because the daydreaming is so ridiculously good at masking it. As soon as I started trying to curb my daydreaming and get a hold, of my mind, all of those things that it was hiding started showing themselves. And it actually feels like getting worse. So I think the difference between me and Sam is that Sam figured out a way to, employ it when she needed to use it responsibly, I guess. And I, jumped face first into active, avoidance, compulsive, just covering up, avoiding discomfort whatsoever. And that's how I ended up. I ended up just going, and now even when I don't need it, because it comes up, I'm beyond maybe any of the problems that triggered it, which, I don't really know what they are, but my life is good. My life is good. I have, I own a house. I was educated. I have a good relationship with my husband. I have a son. We're financially stable. We're fine. Things are fine, but I still can't stop. It's something more that once it, what am I trying to say here? Once it has a foothold in your life, it's really hard to get rid of. And it's hard to rewire your brain not to default to daydreaming for every little thing.
And would you be okay with daydreaming at some time? Because for me, I found the sweet spot was I did get on medication. And at one point I was on such a high dose, I couldn't daydream at all. And I missed my characters. I didn't like that, but I was able to lower the dose. So I was able to, what I thought was the sweet spot was I could daydream when I wanted to. I was on a long bus ride, out to visit I lived in New York City, and Sam and Britt, when they were little, my nieces live in Pennsylvania, and it was a 3-hour bus ride. And I would intentionally I'm not recommending this to everyone, but I would intentionally lower my medication so that I would have 3 hours of the best daydreaming time. But then when I needed to do something, I would go up on it. So it was this beautiful thing where I could daydream when I wanted, but I didn't do it out with others or at work. So I don't know, do you feel, Kristen, that you have to stop completely? What is your goal?
Right. Well, that is the goal, right? That's the dream. Have control. Be an Alan.
Yeah.
But how do you get to that point? Because I really do think because I've been doing this since I was 5. It's just the way my brain is wired. And I have to put so much effort into rewiring that before I'm going to have control. So maybe I do have to stop completely before I can restart, or what I'm trying to do is sort of step down gradually and lean into it. But I mean, who knows if that's going to work?
I wondered, going cold turkey, so to speak, right? With, for alcohol, it might be possible because you can just not buy alcohol at home, right? But your mind is always there. Yeah. So that's a little harder to cut yourself off from without medication or something. And I know some friends who have like OCD and like medicate with cannabis or and whatnot. But I'm wondering if any sort of creative outlets, or if you've done any sort of creative outlets to do so, right? I play music, but the characters obviously doesn't quite manifest the same way. So I very recently just started like doodling. You can't see because of my background, but I just like, have characters. So like, I don't know, like it kind of lets me slow down the daydream to a point, because I have to like kind of focus on like, of realizing it into reality, right? Of like drawing it, making sure it looks right, coloring it. And so it's not just like an image in my head that I can't get out. I just kind of slow down and try to get it out.
And I could see that process being like, it could even not debilitating, but like if someone then maybe got obsessed in that way. But I think what you're saying is a great point too, because it's like a way to process it,
right? And externalize it a little bit.
Yeah,
right.
kind of, externalize it and be grounded. I don't know, Kristen, do you have any experience with that kind of thing, or?
A very little bit. The problem is I'm just not creatively inclined. I'm not an artist. I am not a writer, but I have tried to draw them, and I threw that out the window. I rage quit because I have no reference. It's only in my imagination, and I'm not a good enough artist to draw from my imagination. They never look like what they are supposed to look like. It just gets frustrating. I just get angry. Like, well, that's a picture of him, but it's not him. It's not him.
Yeah.
It doesn't look anything like him.
Yeah.
And, and I sat down and I tried to write, but I've had the same daydream, the same like paracosm for 30 years. I have 30 years of character development and backstory and like 3 generations. And I'm not devoting my life and my education and my financial resources into becoming a writer good enough to write something like that down. Like,
right. I bet George R.R. Martin is an immersive daydreamer.
I know. If I were a writer, if that were a passion of mine, I think those would go together really nicely, but I don't happen to be one.
Kristen, what do you think is the thing that's most troubling? Because in some ways you sound so similar to Alan and Sam, and yet they don't think it has a negative impact on their lives, and you do. Like, what do you think those differences are? Like, what do you not like about it? Is
right. Okay. I think probably the best example I can give, and it's examples I've given on like these panels before, is that it makes the decisions for you, or you will pass over opportunities for it. I had a decent job. I was a photographer. I was good at my job. My clients, well, no, not the kind I did.
But keep going.
But I had an opportunity. They were like, okay, promotion, and I said no, because I was not willing to take on the extra time and responsibility. I wasn't willing to change my lifestyle. So there you go. Like, my career just stalled out because I don't take opportunities, because they'll change too much about my access to my daydreaming time or my free time. It's not really free time, but and then now my son is 8, and I put off having another child for so long because the first one takes a lot of time. Like, these are major life decisions.
Yeah.
And now I really regret that. I wish that I had children closer together. He's, but it's fine. It's fine. It's not really fine, but it's fine.
And we all make decisions in life that later we sometimes regret. But do you think did the daydream enter in that decision? You thought we wouldn't have enough time to daydream with?
Yeah. Kids they just take up so much time. I mean, the only time in my life I have never daydreamed was the first 3 months of my son's life. And that's just because I was so
actually exhausted.
Yeah.
You're tired to daydream. Yeah.
Yeah.
And those are the two like huge examples from my life, but it doesn't end with those. It's not just those two things. It's every single aspect of my life. Like our dentist called us and told us, if you no show me again, I'm not going to be your dentist anymore. We've paid a small fortune in late fees because when I get into a car and that radio turns on, I'm gone. It's too much of a trigger, and I don't show up for my appointments.
Yeah.
I forget things, and people, when I'm speaking to people, like we were saying in the last video, it's always right there waiting for a chance to come around. So you're never fully engaged in a conversation. So now, guess who I am? I'm the unreliable friend. I'm the friend that you can't trust.
Yeah, you remember, you have the characters from 30 years and you know who they are and can build upon that. No problem. So it's like probably so frustrating because it's like, I have the ability. It's just like, where is my energy going?
Yeah.
No, the person who doesn't listen, and it caused problems in my marriage because I'm the partner that doesn't listen to what he's saying. We had the pizza incident. He came in, he tells me, I'm going to make some pizza. I'm not going to use the pizza stone though. I'm going to put it in the microwave. He comes, I'm like, okay, that sounds great. I kissed him. I spoke to him. I kissed him. He goes in, comes back 2 minutes later with a piece of pizza for me. And I'm like, why didn't you use the pizza stone? And it sounds so stupid, but it was 1,000 little things like that. And that was the one that finally broke him. Just, you never listened to me. We literally just had this conversation. What is wrong with you?
So you're still like engaging with people like on autopilot.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that might be a difference, is that disability. Alan, it sounds like you can, I really think, we have another person who will say nameless in our family, me and Sam, who also I think is immersive daydreaming, but the difference is it's a concrete, like hour at a time, every night, 9 to 10, leave them alone, gonna pace. Right. But
even just in between moments, but I'm never not like consciously doing what I'm doing, right? Like if Monica's saying something to me, I hear it, right? Or I didn't, but yeah, if I'm engaging, even if I'm like, back of my mind, picture in picture type life.
It's definitely a spectrum. And I think, just talking about treatment, because the emails I get all around from around where people like Kristen just, you express it so eloquently and you're speaking on behalf of so many people. So, I'm so grateful for that, because it seems like there's millions of people with this. And frankly, when they go seek help, they get the same results, unless they get to a Dr. Sommer, the same answer I got in 95, that there's no such thing as a daydream disorder. But what I think is interesting is that there is no set treatment right now for maladaptive daydreaming. Dr. Sommer has shown, believes cognitive behavioral therapy might be able to work. Also just meditation and mindfulness, getting more engaged in one's own life, I believe helps. But I think back to the earlier part of the conversation, it's often combined with something else. Like I still believe that, we're born with this innate ability. I think Alan, Sam, me, Kristen, we're all born with this innate ability. Sorry, Brittany. But I think the rest of us were born with this innate ability. But if there's something else, whether it's trauma, whether it's anxiety, in my case, it was OCD, that could make you pull you over the edge. And that's why I think for me, curing the OCD is what limited the daydreaming, whereas someone else could take that same medication and not, it might be like working on, at least until there's a cure for maladaptive daydreaming, whatever it is. So in Kristen, in your case, it might be an anxiety. I don't know. Does that ring true?
Yeah, it sounds like we've all used it as a different form of coping, right?
Yeah.
And adapted it, so to speak, to our needs. But it sounds like maybe some coping or was so necessary throughout your like constantly that your brain has triggered itself to just fall into that rather than
and that probably requires the help of a therapist or medication or something like that. But yeah, any other thoughts? I think this is just everybody's been shared so much and so eloquently, and I think it's going to resonate with a lot of people out there. Kristen, I'm always just in awe of how much you've done for the community, and you're a mom and do just really, like, I know this is such a huge challenge for you, but I think you're like pretty incredible at dealing with it and speaking out about it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay,
Went on
so
a
I'm
bit
gonna
of a tangent there.
no, so I'm gonna stop